YouTube. This week we're looking at JavaScript and how we can use JavaScript to create very simple animations this week and building up to more complex animations as we go, with the idea of making a game. Without any further ado, let's get started.
So the first thing we're going to look at is what exactly is an animation. As you're probably aware, an animation is just a series of images which, when played together, create the effect of smooth transitions between them, giving the illusion of things moving when in fact they aren't, just a series of static images. And here's an example of those frames of animation tied together to give the illusion that the character is walking. So how can we do this in HTML? Well, the answer is to use an HTML5 canvas element and draw each of the images in code. The screenshot here is from a game I created. It's going to be released soon. The most important part of an animation is the animation loop, which redraws the frames, each frame, and displays them to show them on the screen. We need to do this at least 25 times a second to create a smooth animation. And that means we have to refresh the page every 40 milliseconds. Fortunately, JavaScript provides us the ideal way to do this with a function called setInterval. This allows us to create a function, pass the name of that function to setInterval, and give it the number of milliseconds before calling it again. We also need to set up the canvas in the HTML. The canvas itself is just a regular HTML tag, but I've wrapped it in this div so that we can get hold of it more easily. We also need to trigger a function to load when the page is finished loading, or we won't be able to get access to the elements on that page in the JavaScript. We do that by using the onLoad attribute of the body, which will allow us to run a JavaScript function, in this case the function I've created called page_loaded, whenever the page is finished loading. Then, in the JavaScript, we create two variables outside of any functions, so they appear globally. One called CTX, which is the drawing context, and one which is the canvas. Then, once the page is finished loading, it runs this function, page_loaded, and we can set the canvas equal to document.getElementById, which gives us the document, and it's by the name that we gave it, which is canvas. We can then use the canvas object to get a two-dimensional drawing context, as shown here. Now that we've set up our update function to run every 40 milliseconds and also got our drawing context, we can update it like this. As you can see at the top of the function, we call clearRect, which simply clears the entire thing. We save it. Start by calling beginPath, which allows us to create a set of things that we're going to draw on the page. We then do all of those. In this case, it's just one, CTX_arc, which allows us to draw a circle. And then when we're finished on that particular path, we call CTX_stroke. And then finally, we call restore, which says that we've finished drawing the frame and now to display it. In our example, we're going to be drawing a circle and then moving it from side to side. We do that by creating the location variable at the top and whether it's moving left or not. If it's moving left, we're going to move it left 4 pixels on each update. And if it's not, then we're going to move it right 4 pixels. At the bottom are some boundary checks so that when we get to 200, we're going to make sure we start moving back again. And if we get below 50, we will start moving right again. And now we're going to put all that together. I'm using Visual Studio Code. And as you can see here, I have a fresh project with a single file in, the HTML file. And this is just the outline of the HTML we're going to use. First thing we're going to do is put the canvas element in that we discussed. We can see that we've given our canvas an ID, we've given it a width and a height, and then I've also given it a margin of 50 pixels to keep it off the edges slightly. Next up, we're going to need to add the onLoad attribute and make sure that we can load a function called page_loaded, and we'll create a script tag at the top to hold that function in. For now, we'll just add a console.log, and this means that we can test our page in order to see whether it's working or not. We go to right-click, Reveal in Explorer, or Reveal in Finder if you're on Mac. That will show you where the file is. And we can see it loads it up in a browser for us. Now if we right-click and go to Inspect, in the console window, we can see it says Page Loaded. Next up, we need to create the global variables to hold the canvas and the context. We set both of those to null. Now, in the page loaded function, we can get rid of the console.log and load up the references to the canvas and the context that we need. After this, we need to create our update function to run all of the updates. You can call this function whatever you want. I just happen to call it update. And then we do set interval, passing the name and the number of milliseconds in between. Now we need to create our update function and make sure it's called every 40 milliseconds. And now we can start clearing the original rect and redrawing the circle on the page. We'll do that now. And with the code ready to go, we can now save it, run the code, and make sure it's still working. As we can see, when we refresh the page, we can see it's drawn the circle for us on the canvas as we'd expect. Now we need to move the circle. We move the circle by creating the location variable that we mentioned before. The set is moving left equal to false. I tend to do all of my game updates before drawing anything, so let's do that now. And finally, we need to make sure that we're drawing the circle at the location. And as you can see, when we refresh the page, it's now animating the circle, moving from side to side. And that's it. That's your very first animation in JavaScript. The links to the code are down below. Please leave any comments that you have and let me know anything you'd like to see in the future.
Thanks for tuning in. Hope you've got something out of this week. If you've enjoyed it, please leave a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe down below. Hopefully see you next time.